Greetings everyone and welcome to Revolution of Reality. I'm Eddie Conradi. Though global tensions are rising, there seems to be hope for a more harmonious future from a very surprising source: physics. Experiments have revealed that the universe could be structured very differently to what we have always assumed. There seems to be a previously undetected interconnection between every body and everything. If these experiments are validated, it would bring a wave of positive change crashing over our civilization, because this interconnection would bind us together for many different reasons, as I will explain in the videos ahead. These experiments also seem to indicate that human beings have extraordinary capabilities. In this first video, I will briefly set the scene for what lies ahead. Please note that no special knowledge of physics is required in order to gain value from these videos. I'll be using simple diagrams and simple terminology in the hope that the average high school student will be able to understand it. Up until recently, the idea of extraordinary powers of the mind has had no place in the current paradigm of physics, and it was pretty much case closed. But a lot has changed recently with the onset of a crisis in physics. Take a look at Wikipedia's list of unsolved problems in physics. I'll let the list scroll through so you can get an idea of the extent of it. This is a growing list of both minor and major problems. The nature of these problems is severe enough to warrant this question: is the standard model out? That's an absolute bombshell of a question, and it's impossible to overstate the potentially explosive impact of this issue, because the very foundation of physics theory is under threat, and the question being posed is this: is it time for the next great paradigm shift to a radically different account of the universe? So we are now facing a potential revolution in physics, and it could turn out that powers of the mind are theoretically possible and can be explained under the new paradigm. There certainly seems to be sufficient experimental evidence to warrant a full-blown scientific investigation. Let's take a look at some of the experimental evidence involving the following abilities: telepathy, precognition, precognition in dreams, remote viewing, which is the ability to psychically view the content of a remote location, and presentiment, which is a bodily reaction that occurs prior to emotional experiences. These are commonly referred to as psychic abilities or parapsychological phenomena because they are studied by the field known as parapsychology. Parapsychologists refer to them simply as psi, so we can refer to these experiments as psi experiments. In 2018, Epochal, professor of psychology at Lund University in Sweden, published a meta-analysis of plus-minus 1,700 psi experiments that had been published in peer-reviewed journals, conducted in roughly 4 dozen laboratories around the world and involving about 10,000 participants. The meta-analysis was accepted for publication in the American Psychologist, the flagship journal of the American Psychological Association. This is a breakthrough for parapsychology because high standards are required to get research published in this kind of top-tier conservative mainstream science journal. In this video, the results of this meta-analysis are summarized by well-known parapsychologist Dean Radin. It includes 2 different types of precognition. These values here are the p-values, or probability values. The p-value for telepathy, for example, is 10 to the minus 16. If you're unfamiliar with this term, you can think of the p-value as the probability that telepathy does not exist, which in this case would be this number when expressed as a percentage, and therefore the probability that telepathy does exist is this number, which has 16 nines in it. The p-value required for discovery in particle physics is this. For example, the existence of the Higgs boson could only be accepted when experimentation had produced a p-value less than this, which is naturally a high standard because the Higgs boson is a critical component of the standard model of physics. Telepathy experiments have exceeded this high standard by a factor of 300 million. As you can see, each of these forms of extrasensory perception has exceeded this high standard required for fundamental components of physics. The decision to publish this evidence could not have been an easy one for the editors of American Psychologist. Take a look at what happened 7 years earlier, when parapsychological evidence was published in another top-tier mainstream journal. A paper presenting the evidence for presentiment, or feeling the future, had been authored by Darrell Bem, professor of psychology at Cornell University. According to the journal's editor, it had been peer-reviewed by 4 very trusted reviewers, all of whom agreed that it had met the standards for publication. Condemnation from within the scientific community was swift, emerging in the New York Times even before the journal's date of public release. The decision to publish was sparking outrage, mortification, and a mixture of amusement and scorn. "There has to be a cut-off for craziness," said Douglas Hofstadter, a professor of cognitive science. If any of his claims were true, then all of the bases underlying contemporary science would be toppled, and we would have to rethink everything about the nature of the universe. That's a valid argument, given the status of physics in 2011. Who could have guessed that 3 years later, similar words to these would appear on the front cover of Scientific American? Take a look at the subtext. If supersymmetry doesn't pan out, scientists need a new way to explain the universe. The unthinkable was now a distinct possibility. Scientists might indeed have to rethink everything about the nature of the universe. Supersymmetry is a theory that would rescue the standard model from some of its major problems. "Prove it right in the next year," said the headline article, "or confront an epochal paradigm shift." Supersymmetry failed all tests over the next few years, and by 2019 the theory was dead as far as most physicists were concerned. The question mark had become an exclamation mark. The current crisis in physics can be summed up as follows. Physicists need to find new physics in order to make progress with unsolved problems. No significant new physics has been found since the 1970s. A project spanning more than 3 decades was undertaken to find new physics, including supersymmetry, but no new physics has been found. This is evidence of new physics. If physicists were able to validate these psychic abilities via their own experiments, it would be like manna from heaven. It would jumpstart the stalled progress in fundamental physics. It would surely be the most significant discovery in the history of science, because all of the bases underlying contemporary science would be toppled, and we would have to rethink everything about the nature of the universe. It would indicate that the universe, and everything in it, is structured completely differently to what we have always assumed. It would require us to fundamentally re-examine what we are and what we are capable of. However, the most significant outcome to emerge from the validation of psychic abilities would be that separation is an illusion. This is the conclusion that parapsychologists have been obliged to come to, since there is no other way to explain how information can be transferred between 2 people on opposite sides of the planet, and why results do not vary with distance when it comes to telepathy experiments. The illusion of separation would not be a new discovery to physicists, since they have already made a similar discovery called nonlocality. As this article says, physics now suggests that at the most fundamental level, the universe is non-local. There is no such thing as place or distance. This is similar to saying that separation is an illusion. This sounds utterly absurd and completely impossible. However, there is a potential explanation for non-locality, proposed by theoretical physicist David Bohm in this book published in 1980. The universe is holographic. In other words, it has a similar type of structure to a hologram. Similar in that it is a separate reality constructed from a non-separate foundation. Based on Bohm's theories, science writer Michael Talbot wrote a book called The Holographic Universe, in which he proposes that psychic abilities could be explained by Bohm's holographic theories. This shows how valuable it would be to physicists if they were able to validate psychic abilities. Firstly, it would validate nonlocality, confirming that separation is an illusion and that the universe is structured completely differently to what we have always assumed. Secondly, it could potentially lead to the discovery that the universe is holographic, a new paradigm of physics that would replace the flawed standard model, a new paradigm in which we appear to be separate, but fundamentally we are not. So, as we enter 2022, we could be on the verge of an epochal paradigm shift, because at any moment a physicist could decide to investigate the claims of parapsychologists by replicating their telepathy experiments. If telepathy is validated, this could lead to a new era of science. Science based on a completely different version of reality. Physicists could use the meme that separation is an illusion to usher in a new era of social healing. Healing based on the understanding that we are all interconnected with each other at the fundamental level. In the years ahead, this could lead to competition gradually being replaced by cooperation as the primary socio-economic driver. An era of harmony could begin to settle over the planet for a number of different reasons. Because if telepathy is validated, that would not bring on this massive paradigm shift all on its own. Rather, it would open the floodgates of a huge dam of sideline science. This is science that has been dismissed up until now as pseudoscience because it contradicts mainstream science, with parapsychology being a prime example. However, if psychic abilities and the holographic universe become part of the mainstream, then this sideline science would become plausible and worthy of investigation. Sideline science has been a passion of mine for about 50 years, and I cannot begin to convey how much fascinating information is in this dam. Information about our past, present and future, and our true potential, based on a different version of physics and a different version of reality. So feel free to join me in the upcoming videos as we speculate how much of sideline science will become mainstream science and transform our world in the decades ahead.